I'm Susan Carew. I'm from Speak Up for Oneness Radio Australia, and I'm here with Margie Joy. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Now we're going to talk about your background and really explore this issue of oneness. So we might start with a little bit about your background. Can you tell me where you've come from and where you've come to?
So I guess was born into a family of 3 girls, and I had a father with a very severe mental illness, and a baby sister and a sister that was famous as swimmer, Australian swimmer, and so I was kind of in the middle, and I was born sensitive, and nobody really got me, especially my mum. She used to say she didn't understand me, but I knew what was going on underneath everything. I had a perceptive ability and knowing about what was going on, and I knew that and wished that my dad could heal, even back then. So, but I felt really helpless and really struggled through lots of very inappropriate things that happened to me as a child through that. And then when I was a teenager, I was bashed up by my sister's boyfriend, and I'd been naughty and not done the dishes, and that was why I was being minded by them, and then I was berated and told I was wrong for that. So interestingly, as a soul, then I started to believe that I was just essentially naughty and bad. And so,
how old were you at that time?
I was 15
right.
when that happened.
And did it happen the once, or did it
just
happen?
once? And
yes,
it was on a weekend.
And it left a really big impact.
Yeah, very big impact. And from that, then I met a man, a boyfriend, and thought I'd fallen in love, and I had. And he started after a while being abusive. And I thought, well, he'll get better and he won't do it anymore. And I really wanted a family. I just wanted to have children, and so I had 3 children with him. And the abuse got worse over the years. And I was a trained secondary teacher, but I always struggled with that, because at school I didn't want to judge the children. I actually couldn't see the purpose in giving them an A to an E, because I knew that the children that were struggling were doing the best that they could with the circumstances they faced at home or whatever, and so that felt very unjust to me. And I was so sensitive to the environment, really not great in an institutionalised setting. So I was just so ecstatic to have my first baby, and actually having babies and children was just I was just in absolute joy to have them. But I noticed some things happening when I had my first baby. What they would call postnatal depression in women now is that when we give birth, our inner child's wounds come up. So I started to feel a lot of the pain around my father's mental illness patterns, of course, travel through the DNA and the sensitivity. And he, in fact, was a very sensitive man, but never found his true calling in life. And they medicated him and gave him ECT treatment, so this poor man never got to know who he was.
What's ECT treatment?
ECT is when they send electric shocks through the brain. So as a child, I would watch my dad go into this mental hospital and come out with the powder on the sides of his head over and over and over. And he had no memory when he came out, so he couldn't remember anything.
Did he remember you?
He did remember who we were, but he was often really not kind of
present.
With it present. Yeah, he was not really present. And then eventually, by the time I was about 17, he was placed on lithium, and he sort of settled down, but he never really had joy in his life because it just made him flat sort of all of the time. So my mum really carried the load for everyone there, and she was a beautiful angelic woman, actually, full of unconditional love, so we were very fortunate in that way. But she did, when I was going through these issues with my husband, she would say to me that all relationships are difficult. So there I started to have this belief that all relationships were difficult, and I stayed.
Right.
So I stayed until felt like always within I was breaking down, because something never felt right with teaching or being with him. But because I'd been taught not to honour my own knowing, I'd been disempowered all my life and told I was naughty for hiding in cupboards when I knew that people were not safe or situations were not safe. When my father clung to me in bed all night because he thought my mum was going to die and I was 7, no one listened to me that was inappropriate behaviour. So I was always wrong or naughty or just being silly, or, you know, so eventually you don't trust who you are anymore. And so I didn't follow my own knowing, and I just stayed with my husband, and he got more and more abusive.
Can you tell me a little bit about the abuse? What sort of abuse was it?
Very verbal abuse, and mental and emotional primarily, but when it would heighten, he would have me up against walls, but not actually strangle me, but just energetically strangle me. He'd have his hands around my neck, and he'd go off with guns in a car, and he'd keep me emotionally low, so I was always on this sort of roller coaster.
Was that like eggshells?
Yeah, so everyone was walking on eggshells, and he went from passive aggressive to verbally abusive. And the children, you know, would see the car coming down the driveway, and so we knew he was going to be coming home, and what kind of mood would he be in. So life started to revolve around his patterns, which was really, I was always in protection of the children, and made sure as to best I could that they were okay. But of course we can't really protect our children, and as souls they've chosen us as parents to go through the journey they're going to. So,
why did he behave in that way, do you think?
His mother had actually hung herself in the garage and left 5 children. He had a very abusive father, and so the soul, what I have discovered through my journey, and I'll get to that a bit further down the track, is that the soul comes in, and it's chosen to relive in this lifetime the situations that will raise the wounds that are still in the soul and are carried through, and that's in the DNA, it's inside the soul. So in the law is that the soul will attract all to it, all that remains unhealed within it, until it is healed. Right. And so that's why he felt abandoned, so by his mother, and so his fear was that I would abandon him. So what the flip side is control and manipulation in order to hold you there, so he wouldn't have to feel that abandonment, because he'd actually not been allowed to feel it when his mother died. They were not allowed to tell anyone, and they had no expression of emotion. So what I have learnt through all my journey is the way through to healing is to feel it.
Yes.
And you must feel it to heal it.
And it's interesting when you cast your mind around society, around the world, and how there is such a deep suppression of emotion that it's seen as a weakness to reveal it. What do you think about that?
So what I understand from my journey as it travelled along is that at the moment there is the feminine aspect within both the men and women, for both of us, so the male and the females. We each have a masculine and feminine side. So the masculine is the action orientated, more assertive side, the physical orientation, and the feminine is the nurturing, the gentle, the allowing, the receptive, the feeling side of us. And for years, for eons, the masculine has dominated, and the way through for the change of everyone to understand who they are and to actually heal and come into union and oneness within themselves is to bring in this feminine approach into life in every aspect, the physical, the emotional, the mental and the spiritual. It's to bring the gentleness back. So no more hard pushing, it's like gentle, pull back, receptive, loving, kind, and bring in all those beautiful virtues that have always been written about, patience, kindness, compassion, love. And when we become that within ourselves, then the planet will be healed. We come into union with ourselves, and we can come into union in relationship with others in every aspect of life.
So looking at bringing that nurturing energy in, for people who are listening to this who may not have heard this type of language before, they might be saying, well, that sounds interesting, but I don't really get it. Like, how do I if I'm a man who's suppressed my feelings and I'm feeling angry because I'm not heard, or I feel I don't really understand what's going on for me, what does that look like if they want to heal but they don't really know how to?
So what they will see is actually a mirror in the relationships in their life. So they will, particularly in our very close relationships, will actually feel the anger rise. And so instead of actually feeling it and finding an appropriate place to feel that, and that could be going out for a walk and actually physically feeling the anger within. But what happens is they project it at others and blame others for their feelings of being angry. So
give an example of that. Give an example of how a man would do that.
So,
or even a woman, because it's in both cases, isn't it?
Yeah. So in terms of anger, so a man may not feel he has control of, say, of money, and so he comes home and his wife has been and paid bills and spent money on the children, and he picks up a bill and he sees that there's, X, Y and Z on, a Visa bill or whatever, and he will just let fly at his wife about money because he's actually angry that he's not understanding and feels he's not in control of what's going on. So he will blame, because it's easier to blame someone else than to take responsibility. Than in fact, if I actually went out and did shopping or whatever I did and I was actually involved in the process of that, then I wouldn't need to blame someone else. Or otherwise I could develop trust in the person that's doing that, as opposed to looking for a scapegoat for someone else. But this will relate back to something that's happened where they in their childhood or in their soul somewhere don't feel there's anger stored somewhere. So everything will trigger it. So road rage, that's if you're storing anger within the soul, and it can be from this life or any lifetime. The soul has a memory that's come through. It's why we've come into consciousness now with this to actually heal it. And so life mirrors us opportunities. They're actually opportunities to heal it.
So if the man is bringing in that nurturing energy in order to transform this anger, how would that express itself? Like, how would he do that?
Well, he may actually opt for more gentle ways to. He would actually see the stress in his life and his approach to what's going on around him, and the way he would start to own the fact that he is angry. It's not someone else's fault he is angry. And so then look for gentle ways that he might actually release that anger. Yoga. Even there's two parts. Yoga is bringing union of sun and moon together, yin and yang, dark and light, and that is the feminine and the masculine. It is the anger and the gentleness. The thing that is so important that I've learned is that not to judge emotion as good or bad. We've come in to have a human experience, to experience all emotion, from the lowest to the highest. So when we can experience fear, despair, anger, grief, right down at the bottom, the deeper we can go into our own and feel it and let it release through tears. And even if it's anger and we need to punch a punching ball, we're better to get it out of our body than store it. It's very toxic to the body when we store anger. It turns into cancers, all sorts of things. But if we release it in tears or, physically in some way.
Or even writing.
Or writing. There are many, many ways. Getting on a yoga mat brings us in. It allows us to release those feelings out of ourselves and become aware of what's actually going on within us. But the most important thing is not to judge the feelings, to actually just acknowledge them and do something with them to release them.
So if we were in a situation, let's say we role-played this a little bit, and you're the man who's come home and I've spent money, and he's going, oh my God, she's spending all my money, is what his thought is, let's say. Or your thought, if we're playing this out. Yeah. So you're thinking, she spent all this money. How could you communicate to me what you're feeling in a way that doesn't harm me?
So you'd actually begin with, I feel powerless when you go and spend money.
Or I feel angry.
I feel angry.
You've just spent my money and
I don't know where it's going. could you actually share with me what you need to purchase or buy beforehand, so then we can join in and be a bit more together than actually one of us just going off. It's about communicating with openness and honesty. So when people can actually express their feelings in their communication, that's when life changes.
And it doesn't have to be aggressive, because what you said before was that you were experiencing verbal abuse.
Yeah.
So that could be something like, you know, you do all this to me, you drive me crazy, you just go off and do your own thing, you never talk to me, or you're not listening, rather than I don't feel heard.
Yeah.
And when you do this is how I'm feeling, and what I would want is this, a shared decision-making process. So what we're really talking about here is problem solving.
Definitely.
Together.
Yeah.
So the person's not causing your pain, but you're feeling this pain and projecting it onto the other because you won't own it because you're afraid. Would that be right?
Because you're afraid to feel the anger. So it's easy to project it, but actually to feel it and own it is very scary, because we've been taught not to feel. And particularly, that's the masculine aspect.
Yeah.
And so particularly, I have so much empathy for men, because they were not actually given permission to feel as children. Girls still struggle with that as well, but not so much as the men, because the men were just told, toughen up, it's like not good to cry and all that. And the tears are the cleansing of the soul. They're the way through to the soul. They allow us to feel. And the important part, the most important part, the more you allow yourself to feel the fear, the darkness, the everything we would judge as bad in society, the greater you can feel the joy, the light. So it's like a scale. As far as you feel down this way into the darkness, the further you can feel in the lightness. So then the soul starts to lighten. And
it's releasing, isn't it?
It's releasing. You get a release. So you will know when you feel yourself. If you have a good cry afterwards, you might be right down here. And so if you're feeling... Depression is suppression of emotion. It's holding it in. It's resistance to feeling what we need to feel. And children don't do that. Children just are natural. They do what they need to do. They feel sadness. They tell you when they're angry. And we tell them not to be.
So that's a really key point, which I'm going to re-emphasise. Suppression of emotion causes depression.
Yes.
And I want people to really hear that, because we've been taught that it's a weakness, and this is a suppression of the feminine within.
Yes.
Both men and women.
Absolutely.
We're told it's a weakness. Don't show your weakness. So men often go to the pub, they have a few drinks, I feel better now. But the truth is it's still there until it's released.
And they actually then develop addiction to suppress feelings. So any addiction is actually just a suppression of feeling what they haven't felt from childhood or from past in the soul. It's still stored in the soul. We just keep putting a lid on it, lid on it, lid on it. And the older we get, it's like just builds up within the body. And so you see it in people's bodies, you see it in their faces. It causes aging and disease within the body, and unhappiness generally. And happiness is really feeling peace within. But when we've released all of those negative stored emotions that were repressed from as far back as, in the memory, then naturally just inside is a natural happiness and joy and peace that develops within the soul naturally, and life changes.